समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया.
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
अब समझा.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to our 10th episode of Geopolitics with Swasti with our consulting editor and foreign policy expert, Swasti Rao. Before we begin, actually, Swasti, we have some really exciting news. About the Print School of Journalism. Do you want to tell us?
Yeah, so the Print School of Journalism has now opened admissions for its 4th batch. Please apply if you're interested. And this time around, I'm going to be teaching a course there on India's security and defense policy.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. Please join. She's going to be great, as is the rest of the course. So I thought we'd start this episode, since you wrote your column about this week, I thought we'd start this episode with Turkey. So we have two questions on Turkey. One of our members, Kartik Parashar, asks if a regime change in Turkey will help India. And Anubhav Saxena asks about Turkey and India's relations. Specifically, are relations tense because of Turkey's support for Kashmir? And also, what role does Pakistan play here?
Well, that's an interesting question. And my Friday column, incidentally, has been on the political turmoil in Turkey. So I urge you to go and read it as well. The link for it is given in the description box. But in short, yes, for the first ever time in more than 2 decades, Erdogan, who's Turkish president, is facing some formidable challenge from Imamoglu, who is incidentally the mayor of Istanbul. And what happened a few days ago was that Erdogan, of course, the state apparatus under Erdogan's directives went and arrested Imamoglu from his place. And ever since, there's been thousands of people have taken to the streets and they are basically protesting and calling it unlawful. Now, in short, whether there'll be a regime change there or not actually remains very uncertain, because on the one hand, yes, the kind of protests that you are seeing in Turkey today are quite unprecedented. In fact, the only other time that one can think of something close to this was in 2013 when for a different reason. But this time around, it looks very serious because the opposition seems to have also united. And frankly, Erdogan in the last 20 years have taken things too far, especially after 2017 when he introduced sweeping, I would say, reforms in the Turkish constitution. And from a parliamentary system, it kind of changed it to a presidential system, and in many ways creating situations and conditions so that he can rule until eternity. So this is something which is going down very, very, I would say, unfavorably with a lot of youth and students, and they are the primary protesters out there. So whether there'll be a regime change, we will have to see. I would not like to jump the gun and say that I take a call on that. So I'd be more responsible. But whether it is in India's interest. Now very quickly, yes, in short, it will be in India's interest, because what has happened under Erdogan is that Turkey has taken a very, very Islamist kind of a personality. So in fact, the ideology that is often referred to that belongs to Erdogan or Erdogan is perpetuated is called political Islam. And in fact, Vandana, I must tell you this, and this I'm sure you would be interested in knowing, that I was in Turkey around 2011 or 2010, and I had gone there to present a paper at a conference, and my paper was on the ramifications of political Islam. And I was actually asked by the organizers to mute or tone down my paper, not calling out against Erdogan, because I was basically arguing that the moderate nature of Turkey, when it changes, what kind of ramifications will it have for the world? And this was, of course, I was arguing it 10 years ago, and more than 10 years ago. So indeed, political Islam has been very, very restrictive. It has crushed all kind of dissent. And on the other hand, Ekrem Imamoglu, who's this person right now in spotlight, does talk about a more pluralistic society. In fact, he belongs to the same political party that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of Turkey, founded. So in many ways, yes, he does represent a kind of a break from Erdogan's style of politics. So in that sense, it is going to be good for India in that very limited sense, if at all there is a regime change. So that's one part. But very quickly, I think when it comes to Turkey, one also has to understand that even before Erdogan, around 2000, there was a prime minister, when there was a post of prime minister. By the way, Erdogan abolished the post of prime minister in 2017. Now there's only president and vice presidents. So back in the year 2000, when there was a post of prime minister, in fact, there has been one figure in Turkish politics who needs a special mention here, whose name is Bülent Ecevit. And Bülent Ecevit was a Turkish prime minister who made a trip to India. And he made a trip to India attempting to dehyphenate Turkey's foreign policy with Pakistan on the one hand and with India on the other hand. Because as you rightly mentioned, Pakistan factor has been playing a very, very, I would say, potent role in how Turkey looks at South Asia and India. And it was the first time, when Ecevit came, when he said that we are looking at the Kashmir issue in a bilateral way between India and Pakistan, because ever since, and especially under Erdogan, he has always referred to Kashmir as a multilateral issue. He's always sort of, supported Pakistan when Pakistan has wanted to internationalize, Kashmir issue. You know that under Simla Accords, we have decided to resolve it bilaterally, but Pakistan is always trying to internationalize and sensationalize it, and it always gets the support of China and Turkey. So long and short is that there was a brief period when you did see that there was some attempt made by the Turkish state, and when I said the Prime Minister Ecevit, who came to India, and that was really welcomed. That stance was really welcomed in India. That was also a period when, consciously speaking, India's trade with Turkey also grew. Okay, but then came Erdogan and political Islam and this entire narrative of looking at South Asia from that Islamist, lens, and things have changed. Now, very quickly, what has changed is that Turkey has emerged as one of the biggest suppliers of defense equipment to both Pakistan and Bangladesh. And you know that with Pakistan, our ties are always very problematic. But lately, after Hasina's ouster, our ties with Bangladesh have also become very complicated. And this might seem a little strange to you, because generally it is China that is regarded as the number one defense supplier to both Pakistan and Bangladesh. But you know what? There is a problem. And the problem is that the Chinese weapons, they have a quality issue. And this is something that has been taken up again and again. Of course, there are assessments made about how Pakistan, when it took some frigates from China, they faced certain technical issues. Similarly, when Pakistan, got some missile systems from China, it had another set of technical issues. Similarly, the JF-17 fighter jets that Pakistan has co-produced, quote unquote, with China, they also have certain issues. So what I'm trying to say here is that because there is no other Western country that is selling any weapons to Pakistan, and because Chinese weapons have these quality issues, Pakistan is very happy to buy from Turkey, and Turkey has been filling the gap there. So in South Asia, there is a policy of Turkey to supply weapons, and especially state-of-the-art, the drones and all that stuff, to countries that are Islamic. And that is why you see this kind of an encroachment into Pakistani and Bangladeshi defense needs from Turkish side, because China has been given weapons, but they have been running into quality issues. And it's the same problem that you would also see for Bangladesh, that Bangladesh has also ordered a lot of weapons, but many of them actually have been running into, quality issues, because one of the problems with Chinese weapons is that they've never been put to test in a real battle. On the contrary, Turkish defense military industrial complex has really grown. And in fact, one of the biggest tests, battle-proven technology there, the Bayraktar drones, etc., that are being used in the Ukraine war. In fact, there are also some reports that talked about Turkey giving its S-400s. Remember, Turkey had bought S-400s from Russia. And because of that, the Americans had put sanctions on Turkey. Now, Turkey has never deployed those S-400s. And now some reports even go to the extent of suggesting that Turkey could be mulling to sell these S-400s to Pakistan to be used against India. And of course, you know that Russia is arming China with similar air defense systems. So this is a very, very complicated scenario. But why I'm saying this is because this is also a time when Turkey is trying to reinvent its ties with the West. In fact, like I said, that because of its role in the Ukraine war, they have been, right now, the West is kind of, especially the Europeans, are mollycoddling Turkey, and they are also very silent on whatever's going on inside, Turkey. So long and short is that when it comes to South Asia and to India, Turkish defense posture, especially the export defense posture towards Pakistan, has been a problem. Because again, another thing, Vandana, I'd like to mention here, because of the Russia-Ukraine war, we saw that Russia's export base, globally collapsed. So the deterioration that we saw in the Russian arms exports all over the world was about 53%, okay, which is quite staggering. So before the war, the Russians were selling their arms to about 31 countries. After the war started, and because of the pressures on their military industrial complex, it kind of fell down to 10 or 11 countries. And this is all CIPRI database, and you can just go and access it. So what I'm trying to say is that all that void that has been created has actually been usurped by countries like China and now Turkey. And that is why it's a bit of a problem for us, because Turkish weapons are also battle tested, and frankly the best that a country like Pakistan can have right now. So that is what the complication is.
Actually, that's a really good segue into some of our other questions, which I think is leading into a discussion on Pakistan. So, at Aditya18893 asks about the situation in Pakistan. With growing economic concerns, there's tensions with the Taliban. There's a situation in Balochistan which is unfolding. So he asks, A, do you think Pakistan is the most volatile state in South Asia right now? And B, we have another question from Arnav Sharma, who asks about another aspect of this. He says, as Pakistan's focus and resources are diverted, is a destabilized Pakistan helpful for India? Also, what are the geopolitical dangers for us if internal situation in Pakistan keeps on deteriorating?
Right. So this is a fairly layered question, Vandana, because it kind of stems from a lot of these notions that we have about Pakistan. Let's start with the easiest part of this question, which is that is Pakistan the most volatile state in South Asia? I think if you ask me which is the most volatile state in South Asia, I would say it's Myanmar. Because if you remember, we also took up Myanmar in our previous episode, and Myanmar is really a very problematic state. Now, compared to that, Pakistan is, yes, volatile, but it is wrong. And I would make some strong statements here. There is a tendency in Indian strategic analysis that refers to Pakistan as a failed state and always refers to, the more insurgencies in Pakistan, the merrier for India, because it weakens Pakistan from within. Now, any serious analyst or any serious security expert would say that these are very silly, simplistic narratives. And I'll give you some reasons so you can take your own key takeaway from my argument. If you agree or disagree, it's up to you. But then I'll tell you why I say that. See, Pakistan may be a weakened state, but just look at it from India's perspective. Their problems with respect to the Baloch insurgency, or their problems with respect to the TPP or the Pashtun, which is basically a Pashtun problem, right? That insurgency has not really impacted Pakistan's ability to infiltrate terrorists into Indian territory across the LOC. In fact, in the last 1.5 years, 2 years alone, if you look at the number of people, the number of troops, the soldiers, including officers that have died on the Indian side, that alone tells us that when it comes to using the proxies or the terrorists, okay, for gaining strategic depth into India, I think Pakistan's ability has only improved. If it has not been affected by what they are facing inside of their countries with respect to what is happening in Balochistan or in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, etc. And that should really tell us where things are in a more professional manner. So don't buy this argument that the weaker Pakistan is on the inside, the better it is for India. No, frankly, it is not better for India. And now I'll give you another set of examples why it is not good for India. Let's imagine if Pakistan were to break up, Vandana. If Pakistan were to break up, what happens to Pakistan's other security apparatus? Remember, it is a country with 170 nukes. Okay, it has nuclear weapons. Remember that predominantly the Pakistani army is comprising of Punjabis. So if if at all Pakistan were to break up, let's say in the Sindhis or the Balochis or,
Balochis,
the
yeah.
Pashtuns, etc., were to, carve their own, little states, the remaining Pakistan is going to be a more powerful Pakistan because of the fact that it will still have 90% of its army resources, okay, all of its nukes, and less people and less problems to
Yeah.
handle. So, and on the contrary, I don't know if you know, but the Gujarat border, I mean, in the state of Gujarat, the border that we share with Pakistan is not as manned as the one that we have in Kashmir.
Very
So there
porous.
will be, it's very porous, and we are basically opening up a Pandora's box if we are talking about Pakistan as a failed state, as a state that disintegrates into smaller parts. Will that be great for India? No. The answer, no matter how politically correct it sounds, is that a stable Pakistan, which is on its way to modernize, is actually best suited for India. And the other example that I can tell you from this is that if you look at the manifesto of most of the people, most of the political parties in Punjab, right, all of them mention, and this is not just about the separatists or somebody, they also, Akali Dal and all these
Yeah,
parties there
yeah.
that mention that they want more trade with Pakistan.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is that what we are thinking in terms of what we see on social media, or the kind of very provocative statements that we keep hearing across the strategic community, don't buy that. That is not how statecraft is done.
But Swasti, how serious is the Baloch insurgency right now?
Now, as far as the Baloch insurgency is concerned, to your direct question, see, from Pakistan's perspective, there is a cyclical nature to it, which means that it keeps coming in cycles. And if I'm talking about the latest one, so it was last year in November when the Pakistani army came up with their own special operation against the Balochis, okay? And they targeted two main players there, which is the Baloch Liberation Army, the BLA, and the Baloch Liberation Front, or the BLF. And frankly, what I'm trying to say is that whether they are successful or not, of course, that's their headache. It is a serious enough thing, and we keep supporting that from India because of the arguments that I just gave. But because that has not impacted Pakistan's ability to infiltrate into India, I think that is something that we need to be worried about. Not in terms of how they are handling it, and frankly, they have put together a very, I would say, professional capabilities to tackle both the Baloch insurgency as well as the Pashtun insurgency. So whether or not they'll be able to tackle it is something which is different. But to me, as an Indian and as a security expert, what concerns is that it's not really impacted their ability, and that's what I'm interested in. In fact, if I'll just tell you something more interesting, which is that I don't know if you know that what Pakistan has done is that Pakistan has put together what is called the BATs, or the Border Action Teams, into India, and these BATs are a wonderful combination of their special forces, which are called Special Services Group, and militants, and these militants are drawn from very familiar outfits such as Lashkar-e-Toiba or Hizbul Mujahideen or Jaish-e-Mohammed, etc. And a usual BAT comprises of some officers and some of these militants, and they are constantly manning this 778-kilometer long LOC that we have with them, and they are always trying to find our vulnerabilities so that they can sort of perpetuate some kind of guerrilla warfare, etc. So all that has been happening, and it is for us to think that recently we have had to deploy capabilities and assets and troops from the Western Command, from the Northern Command, from the CRPF, from the State Police, and yet we have not been able to tackle the cross-border infiltration. The other problem is that all the regional arrangements such as the SCO, because the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where India, China, Pakistan all are members, and Russia is also a member, has a permanent structure called RADS, which is Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure. But it's basically dysfunctional, because Pakistan is the real problem that we have when it comes to cross-border terrorism, and that structure has not been able to help us either. So cutting a long story short, Vandana, what I basically wish to convey here is that for us to assume that the end of Pakistan is near because there is a Baloch insurgency happening, or because there's a Pashtun problem, etc., I think is an incorrect assumption, and we should be more objective in assessing what our real threats are, and frankly stop referring to Pakistan as a failed state, because Pakistan doesn't fit the definition of a failed state. If you say, oh, North Korea is a failed state, it's there, but Pakistan frankly doesn't fit that description. And the more we buy these kind of narratives narratives, the more we become, I would say, subjective in our understanding and, falling into our comfort zones rather than sort of really getting our act together and getting the strategic realism with which we need to really view the situation out there.
Moving right across the border to Bangladesh, we have a question from Ad Rajesh Kumar on the latest developments there. He asks about the possibility of a military takeover there soon, and also if there's a possibility of Sheikh Hasina making a comeback.
Now, Sheikh Hasina making a comeback or a possibility of a coup. Now, very quickly. Now, there are a lot of theories in air. I would suggest that it's better we wait and watch. One doesn't know what kind of a narrative spins out of what kind of a development, but that's the part which is there in the air. But the part that I can tell you something about as an analyst and as a security researcher myself is that I know where this question is coming from, because recently Muhammad Yunus, who's the president, the caretaker government, leader of the caretaker government, was giving an interview, perhaps to Al Jazeera, if I'm not wrong, but he was giving an interview where he said that he would try to put together some elections in 4 years or something. And naturally, then the army chief has responded to it by saying that he would like to see the elections by the end of this year. So Muhammad Yunus is continuing because he right now has the support of the army chief, but for sure that there's something which is cooking. Now, whether that will mean a kind of a coup, I can't rule out the possibility, but we will have to wait and watch. Also, there are also some students who were very instrumental in this entire Hasina ouster have also put together their own parties. So there are different stakeholders there. Does that mean the return of Sheikh Hasina? I don't know. I don't really see any possibilities of that, at least right now. But like I said, that it's better to be a little patient and see which side the things are going. But for sure, I think what is clear is that the Bangladeshi army wants an election very soon.
Right. Swasti, zooming out to the rest of the neighborhood, actually, Anubhav Saxena asks why India has problems with all its neighbors. So I thought we could take it country by country. So let's start with Pakistan. I mean, we've just touched on it.
Now, India having problem with all its neighbors. Well, it is true, but you please understand that India's neighborhood policy doesn't operate in a benign strategic environment. So, India's neighborhood policy or India's neighborhood outreach, whichever way you might like to describe it, is actually happening by way of China's unilateral attempts to really encircle India and stop India's regional rise. So, it is not happening in a benign environment. So it would be wrong to say that India has not made overtures to its neighbors. In fact, you know that when Prime Minister Modi first became Prime Minister in 2014, he really started to, really add a lot of substance to India's neighborhood policy. It's a different thing that it didn't work because as much as we had wanted and expected, because by then Xi Jinping had already come and Xi Jinping and the BRI had already started. So very quickly, I think you have to first then establish the fact that our neighborhood approach or overture or policy is not operating in a strategically benign environment. That's one. The second thing is that also please understand that when it comes to the China factor, because I mentioned it at the outset, in China's treatment or China's overtures to India's neighbors, which is basically coming by way of a lot of money that they give in terms of FDI and the BRI projects, etc., investments and all the help, is basically operating at two levels, Vandana. The first is that, see, it's again fashionable in India to think that China must be keeping us busy. Well, China is not really getting sleepless nights because of India. Okay. From China's perspective, they are looking at India in terms of their larger contestation with the United States, which is unfolding in the larger Indo-Pacific. So, because from their perspective, they already think that India is with the United States when it comes to US-China great power rivalry as the way it's unfolding in the Indo-Pacific. And from that perspective, they would like, as a subset, to respond to that great power contestation, as a subset to that, they would like to encircle India and contain India's regional rise. They do not consider India their peer, frankly. Okay, the only country that they genuinely consider their peer is the United States of America. So you have to look at it like that. Now, what is happening as a result of that is that, like I said, it is a stated aim of the CCP to contain India's regional rise, because China believes in a unipolar Asia, which is led by China. That's the first part. And I remember I told you there are two ways to look at it. The second way to look at it is that engaging India's neighbors and other smaller countries in the Indian Ocean region also establishes China as the leader of the global South.
Right.
And remember that India and China also compete there.
For that position.
Where India comes with a lot of reputational advantage, but frankly, China is what comes with the real money. And that is why you see that despite having so much respect for India, otherwise, I'm not referring here right now to India's immediate neighborhood, but otherwise the countries of the global South still sign up for China's lucrative debt and loans and all of that, because it comes with that. Now, that is something that I just wanted to tell you to give you a broader understanding of why it is a contested region for us, why neighborhood becomes contested. And because it is China's policy to encircle India, China is now signing up for these countries for BRI. In fact, right now, apart from Bhutan, there is no other neighbor in India's immediate neighborhood, that is not a signatory to the BRI.
Right.
Okay. And we can start, of course, you said let's start with Pakistan. So very quickly, yes, of course, Pakistan is home to the CPEC, which is a very, very core Beijing-led BRI project. And the port of Gwadar out there is very important. So if that really becomes completely functional, it would be a new trade route, in many ways. So, of course, Pakistan, I already told you about in the earlier questions when I was answering about how Beijing has also emerged as one of the biggest defense suppliers, to Pakistan, etc. And then Pakistan is always propped up by China, and the situation now gets more complicated because there are also the same overtures being made from Beijing to Bangladesh, right? And for that, from our perspective, then opens 3 fronts and not just 2. So yes, I think that is important. I also told you the regional platforms like SEO do not work. So I think Pakistan factor is something that we keep referring to again and again. I think where we need to spend a little bit of time in understanding Nepal and Bhutan, because Nepal also, by the way, I think Vandana, if I'm not wrong, we did have geopolitics, on this, on Nepal and all. But yes, very quickly, see, when it comes to from the perspective of these small states, right? They are not happy with India's big brother approach. Okay. Now the normal question that arises is that why are they then so accepting to China's big brother approach? Now I think that is something which is more complex, because understand that the countries that were made out of the Indian subcontinent have almost the same identity, the same South Asian, so to say, composition in terms of our DNA, etc. And India then is not liked upon because we are the same. On the other hand, China is a big brother too, but an external actor, and therefore China is for some reason accepted, while India is looked upon with a lot of disapproval. The other thing, but I think frankly it's not just identity, it's also got to do with money, because China comes with deep pockets and India doesn't. Now just to very quickly give you an example, China has been the biggest FDI source for Nepal in last many years. India is not there. I mean, India has tried to help, but India is not there. China has been able to form a relatively anti-India Maoist alliance, which has won the elections right now in Nepal. Now, one of the things that I've always mentioned when I've talked about India's neighborhood policy is that India has consistently made a mistake of engaging pro-India factions, whether it was Nepal, whether it was, Sri Lanka, whether it was Maldives, so on and so forth, whether it was Bangladesh, Hasina, right? On the contrary, I would say that India should be identifying the relevant stakeholders and reaching out to all of them. And a very good example can be given from China's perspective. Like, look at what is happening in Myanmar. So China is engaging the junta as well as the rebel groups. Remember last time
we also talked about.
Yes. So China is arming both because it knows that junta alone doesn't really control the mainland. Similarly, I think India, not to say that we should do similar things like China does. We don't believe in these kind of disruptions, and India has been the only countries that's whose rise has not been destabilizing. So we take a lot of pride in that. But frankly, I would push the Indian side to develop ties and engagements with all relevant stakeholders instead of only pro-India factions. Because pro-India factions, if you're engaging, you are unwittingly you are fueling an anti-India,
Yeah,
feeling
narrative.
in other factions,
Yeah.
and in fact, then it becomes a very easy, low-hanging fruit for their internal politics,
Yeah.
because one faction would win the election,
Yeah.
and the other one would then,
Yeah.
win the election the next time,
Yeah.
etc., playing on the India card, and that's exactly what happened in Maldives with
Yeah.
with respect to
Yeah.
India in and India out.
Yeah.
So I think a more objective analysis and a more objective suggestion would be to engage all stakeholders. So yes, we have problems with Nepal and Kalapani and Lipu Lake, etc. I've talked about that. I've also talked about how the Agniveer scheme has not been accepted, that well by Nepal. And we also recently discussed this issue, this tragedy where a Nepalese girl
The
committed
students
suicide.
in
Yeah,
Orissa, yeah,
in Orissa, and then I
at
think
Kalanga
you remember
University,
that
yeah,
I mean, we should have been more proactive,
yeah,
and we should have been more sensitive about what had happened,
yeah,
instead of making them
absolutely,
feel like some poor cousins. Okay,
yeah,
so I think these are things that we need to be worried about. But I think I would spend a little bit of time on Bhutan, because that is something which is important and we don't discuss it often. I did start and say that Bhutan remains the only country which has not signed up for the BRI.
yeah,
But don't forget that Bhutan, that is considered India's closest ally since long, because of this 1949 India Bhutan treaty that actually gave India control over Bhutan's foreign affairs, etc. But that itself has been revised in 2007. And after 2007, frankly, India's role has been reduced. Okay. Um, Over time, if you look at the time that has passed, China has expanded its territorial claims. And especially when I say territorial claims, I think the thing that comes to everybody's mind is Doklam. Because the Doklam Plateau has been one of the areas, or one of the flashpoints between India and Pakistan in
yep,
2017.
yeah,
So Doklam has been one. The other has been the Sakting area, which has been in the east. So Doklam is in the west, and
yeah,
Sakting is in the east. Now, very quickly, with respect to Doklam, of course, it is crucial for India for very obvious reasons, because it is co-located with a very important strategic point, which is called Jamperi Ridge. And this provides a strategic oversight, of India's main access route to its northeastern states. Now, of course, we had a standoff, and then the problems
yeah,
were resolved. But
yeah,
you know what has happened? And in fact, I'm going to do a worldview on it very soon, because this year is going to be 8 years of Doklam.
right,
So even though the military standoff per se of 2017 was resolved after 90 long days, okay, but China in the interim, ever since, has militarized the plateau, has also created a lot of infrastructure, exactly what they're doing with the LAC, right? So then the tactical disengagement that we are having doesn't really make sense, because by then China has
has
really
kind of
doubled
gone
down
ahead,
on
yeah,
their surveillance and
yeah,
all the infrastructure, etc. So that is something that has been happening. Now, of course, when it comes to Bhutan and Bhutan's perspective, now Bhutan is been maintaining, I would say, this balance. But of late, there have been times when we have felt concerned about Bhutan's acceptance of China in the region. And we are very wary of a situation where Bhutan picks up sides with China
yeah,
instead of us, because China offers some very lucrative deals that India cannot. So very quickly, what India should do then, Vandana, is that we cannot outcompete China when it comes to giving money, loans, etc., even though we keep trying. And because the countries in the region understand the value of a multi-vector foreign policy, so they would like to play all sides. So frankly, what India should be doing is not only to bank upon India's reputational advantage, which is immense, no doubt, but India should be triangulating with the Western partners, because they are also available, present in the region in a big way. So for
exactly,
example, there are two that just come to my mind, are countries like Japan and blocs like the EU that are in this region with Global Gateway, and Japan has been here in a massive way when it comes to infrastructure, etc. In fact, if you look at the this image on the screen, you can see that how heavily Japan is invested in the
yeah,
region. So I think what India should be doing is a framework called triangular cooperation, where India kind of join hands with a Western country,
right,
or a developed country, and then tries to enter into some kind of a developmental arrangement or
project,
development project, yes, for these countries, by way you can give some kind of a variety, some kind of a multi-alignment for these countries, because I
to
think
counter China,
yeah, so you have to look at it in terms of that kind of a engagement, and not a zero sum game, because there we really do not stand any chance. And in fact, let me just also say at this juncture is that one of the reasons why we now see a kind of a diplomatic normalization going on between China and India. In fact, recently I was at a talk given by Dr. Jaishankar, where he said that both sides are now making consensus around the fact that differences shouldn't lead to disputes,
Yeah.
etc. And I think it's a pragmatic stand to take, because militarily we cannot really outcompete China. Economically, we cannot outcompete China. So it's much better to engage China diplomatically and, like I said, through triangular cooperation frameworks, because the countries in the region have a lot of infrastructure needs. The region on the whole, the
Yeah.
Indo-Pacific, Indian Ocean region on the whole, has a lot of infrastructure needs. And the countries in the region would be very happy to diversify. So that's how you engage them. Uh, Unilaterally, I think we can't. And then, of course, are the small little things of, like I mentioned, the
Yeah.
Nepalese incident of India not trying to be the big brother. No, they all go hand in hand. But frankly, it's money, honey.
Yeah. Now, for our last question for today is from at Arun JNGID, who asked a slightly more rhetorical question with relation to Trump 2.0, and how skeptical he is of the role of the UN. So he asks, what kind of long-term impact do you foresee on the legitimacy and efficiency of so-called international institutions like the UN, which appear increasingly unable to enforce ceasefire and humanitarian causes? Can Trump's skepticism actually end up damaging the reputation or the efficacy of such institutions?
Now, with respect to efficacy of these institutions, I mean, they were long questioned even before Trump came. I'm of the view that India should just stop wasting its time with United Nations Security Council, because China will never let India
it
in. So
happen.
we should just, and anyway, United Nations is not a decisive body anymore. People just keep doing these resolutions, and some of the countries keep abstaining, others keep supporting. So it makes for some good, interesting news points, perhaps, but then, frankly, changes nothing in the world. Okay, so United Nations is pretty much redundant in many ways. So does that mean we should just shut it down completely? No, of course not, because it has a lot of other agencies that do a lot of humanitarian work, and in whatever way they are still relevant. Because come to think of that, if they are able to even decrease the total suffering of these conflict situations by a few percentage points, I think in terms of real lives, they are able to save some.
Yeah.
So they remain relevant, but at the same time, they are not decisive. Okay, so like that. And under Donald Trump, of course, it's he's just sort of been very, very unabashed in calling out against all these multilateral institutions. But also remember that with the failure or with the weakening of multilateralism, it also opens up, especially as the big powers are now turning their backs. When I say big powers, I mean US, of course, under Trump. It also opens a lot of space, strategic diplomatic space, for countries like India,
Right.
to take leadership. So all of these situations also have a flip side. It depends on which way you want to look at it. But like I said, that they are not decisive. Okay, so it depends on what you want to do with it. And just my last point with regard to Trump, I think Trump is one factor that we land up discussing in every other episode of Geopolitics. So you can just go and take a look at any of our earlier episodes for it as well. But long and short is, Vandana, that like I said, Trump is too fast and too furious, and sometimes too uncertain and unpredictable as well. So maybe by the time this particular episode is out, he may have already changed his views on something. So I think with Trump, we need to be strategically cautious and patient. So perhaps we need to be more strategically cautious and patient and weather the storm, because Trump is Trump.
Who knows? Yeah. And on that note, Swasti, we'll wrap up for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for watching.